Hello everyone, this is Sarita, Assistant Professor of Chemistry, Government Degree College for Women, Begumpet. In our last class, we have seen the introduction of spectroscopy. So what is spectroscopy? It is the study of interaction of electromagnetic radiation with that of the matter. We have also seen the Lambert-Beer's law and the limitations for Beer's law. So today, we shall discuss the two techniques, that is colorimetry and spectrophotometry, their principle, working, and how they are used for the estimation of unknown sample. So before going into this topic, let us know what is photometry. So as these two techniques are concerned with that of light, because we can study these photometry and spectrometry when the light interacts with the matter. So the study is known as general study, we call it as photometry. So photometry is the most common analytical technique used in the biochemical laboratory. It is designed to measure the intensity of a beam of light. And the principles are applied to several kinds of analytical techniques. So the same principle we actually apply for colorimetry and even spectrophotometry, any IR, UV, anything it may be. So here, when we are talking about the interaction of the light with the sample, so when the light hits the sample, so what happens is the light gets absorbed or it may get transmitted. So the sample will absorb the light and also it transmits the light. So we can measure both the absorbed light or the transmitted light. So we have different techniques for this. Suppose if we want to measure absorbed or the transmitted light, we can use colorimetry, spectrophotometry, atomic absorption, and turbidometry. So by these techniques, we can measure the light which is being absorbed or transmitted. And we can also measure the emitter light, which is the technique used is flame emission photometry. So these are some of the techniques which are related with the light, that is when the light interacts with the sample. So all these techniques actually, they depend on two rules, that is Beer's law, that is two laws, Beer's law and Lambert's law. So first let us see colorimetry. So what is colorimetry? It is a technique used to determine the concentration of colored compounds in sample solution at visible spectrum of light. So this technique is used to determine the concentration of colored compounds. So just remember that only the colored compounds or the sample solution what we are taking should be colored. Then only we can determine the concentration by using colorimetry technique. And what is the light source we are using is at visible spectrum, because as we know that visible spectrum, that is all the colors can be seen, that is between the wavelength 400 to 800 nanometers. So colorimetry is actually used only for the colored compounds. And the principle behind this colorimetry is all the colored solutions will have the property of absorbing certain wavelength of light. Okay, so that is the main principle. So how much light is being absorbed by the sample, that we are going to measure by colorimetry. So the amount of light absorbed or transmitted by a colored solution, that is in accordance with two laws, as I said, it is Beer's law and Lambert's law. So by using these two laws only, we need to determine the concentration of the colored sample using colorimetry. So as we know that Beer's law, so according to Beer's law, in the last class we have seen the derivation part, everything. So the relation that we have to remember is the absorbance of the light is directly proportional to the concentration of the sample solution. So A is directly proportional to C. As the concentration of the solution increases, the absorbance also increases. Then according to the Lambert's law, the absorbance is directly proportional to the path length of the tube. So as the path length increases, the absorbance also increases. So by combining these two laws, that is Beer's law and Lambert's law, we have an expression that is A is equal to epsilon CL. So A is equal to epsilon CL. A stands for absorbance of the light. Epsilon stands for molar absorption coefficient and its units are molar inverse, centimeter inverse. C stands for molar concentration, units are molar, and L stands for optical path length, that is taken in centimeters. So as you can see here, the light which is coming from the source, it is passing through a monochromator. So what is the use of monochromator? It cuts down all the wavelengths of the light. Only a particular wavelength of the light is selected and that light is being incident onto the sample here. The sample solution is taken in a, we call it a cell or a cuvette. Okay, so the sample solution is taken in a cuvette and the light is being incident on the sample. So what happens, this sample solution will absorb some of the light and some of the light is being transmitted out. And when you look at the intensity of the transmitted light, the intensity of transmitted light will always be lesser than the intensity of the incident light. That means intensity of this I will be less when compared to this I naught. And the transmitted light which is coming from the solution will hit the detector. Therefore, a signal is seen. That is the signal which is corresponds to the absorbance or transmittance. So absorbance is nothing but the amount of the light which is being absorbed by the sample. Whereas transmittance is the amount of the light which is being transmitted out from the sample. So both these absorbance and transmittance are inversely proportional. When absorbance is high, transmittance will be low and vice versa. So according to this Beer's law, so when we draw a graph by taking concentration on x-axis and absorbance on y-axis. So what we need to get is, we have to get a straight line like this. Okay, a straight line which passes through the origin. So when we are getting a straight line, that too which is passing through the origin, then we can say that it is satisfying Beer-Lambert's law. Suppose if we draw the graph by taking concentration and the transmittance, we will get a curve in this way. So here you can see that in the first case, when the concentration is low, okay, the absorbance is also low. So as the concentration is increasing, the absorbance is also increasing. So at higher concentration, absorbance is high. Then what about transmittance? At higher concentration, what is happening to the transmittance? It is getting decreased. Okay, so at lower concentration, transmittance is high. Whereas as the concentration is increasing, the transmittance is decreasing. So it is exactly inversely proportional to the absorbance. And this is the light spectrum and their wavelengths. So the white light, when it is passed into a prism, so that light will break up into VIBGYOR, and all these are the wavelengths, different wavelengths. And this red light will have higher wavelength, which is 620 to 750 nanometers. And greater than that will be near IR, which are not visible to our naked eye. And lesser than 380, that is ultraviolet rays, which are, that also they are not visible. So only the region from 380 to 750, or you can take it as 400 to 800 nanometers, is under visible region, where we can see all the colors. And what are complementary colors? So as we know that when a light is falling on a substance, the substance is being, it will absorb all the light, but it also reflects or transmits one light. So the light or the color which it transmits is known as complementary color. So if you take any organic compound, such as suppose if you are taking fruits, red apple, so that color of the apple which is red, why it is appearing red is it will absorb all the colors of the light and it gives out only red color. So that is why red is observed. Yellow for bananas. So bananas will absorb all the light, but it transmits only the yellow light. That is a complementary color. So you can see the primary colors are blue, red, and yellow. So these primary colors will give complementary colors. For yellow is purple, red is green, so blue is orange. So in this way, when a colored solution, when it is absorbing the light, it will give out or it will transmit the color, another color which is having different wavelengths. So based upon this fact, colorimetry works. So these are colorimeters. So here you can see this is the sample holder where we have to place the cell, that is cuvette. And here we can fix the wavelengths on this. It is a sliding one. If you just slide it or roll down, it will show different wavelengths and absorbance. Everything will be displayed here, digital display. Or else this one, this is the sample holder and digital display of the absorbance. So these are colorimeters that we use in our lab. So now we'll see the components of colorimeter. What does it contain? So as I said, it should have a light source and then collimator lens, monochromator. So light source generally, as I said, in colorimeter, so we are that is doing the experiment in visible light. Okay, so for visible light, we use tungsten filament. Okay, so that light, tungsten is acting as the light source here. So the light falls on the collimator lens, then goes on, it falls on the monochromator, which is made up of prism or gratings. So what it does is, it will that is give out only one particular wavelength. See, among all these colors, only yellow color is being passed into the sample solution. So for selecting only one particular wavelength of light, monochromators are used. So when the light is falling on the sample, some of the light is being absorbed and some is emitted out. So the intensity of this emitted light is less when compared to the incident light. And the light that is falling on the detector, so photocells are acting as the detectors. So this light is converted to an electric signal, and there we can read out the absorbance. So this is how, these are the components of the colorimeter. Now we'll see in detail each and every component. First is light source. So light source, as I said, it should be usually tungsten light, tungsten lamp or tungsten filament is taken for visible range. For UV range, we can take deuterium or hydrogen lamp. And for IR radiations, we generally take Nernst glower. So Nernst glower is nothing but it is made up of rare earth oxides, that is oxides of yttrium, zirconium. So when we heat those oxides at about 1500 to 2000 degrees centigrade, it will emit radiations, that is infrared radiations. So they are used to study IR spectra. But for colorimeter, we use tungsten lamp, which is giving out the visible range. So when the tungsten lamp, that is tungsten filament, this is the bulb. We take tungsten filament and this bulb is filled with inert gas. But the main disadvantage of tungsten lamp is the lifetime is limited due to gaseous tungsten formed by sublimation. So because of this, we can go for another lamp such as carbon arc lamp. So if sufficient intensity of light is not obtained, then that tungsten lamp can be replaced by carbon arc lamp, which is acting as a light source. Then monochromators. So use of monochromators, as I told you, it will help in the selection of only one single wavelength of light. Okay, so it is having prisms and filters. So they will help in the cut down of all the unwanted light. So here, suppose if we are using green filter, we have different colored filters which are present in colorimeter. Suppose if we are using green filter, so what does it do is it absorbs all the colors except green light, which is allowed to pass through. So except green light, all the other colors are absorbed. And that green light is made to fall on the sample. can also use filters. So filters, two types we are having here: absorption filter and interference filter. So absorption filter, examples glass filter and gelatin filter. So main difference between these two is this absorption filter will have a wide spectrum, that is around 50 nanometers or more. That means the wavelength width will be more than 50 nanometers. Whereas latest instruments, they are using interface filters where the width is very less when compared to absorption filters. And this monochromator, it consists of entrance slit, absorption or interface filter, prisms or diffraction gratings for wavelength selection, and exit slit. So it is a combination of all these four. So here in the next diagram, you can see the entrance slit. That means where the light is falling on the prism or the monochromator, it is entering. We have collimating mirror where it reflects the light, and then it will fall on the diffraction gratings, that is prism or filters. So what they will do, they will cut down all the other wavelengths. Only the particular wavelength of the light can be selected, and that light is being focused on the mirror, and from there it is coming out through an exit slit. So all these components come under monochromator. So in this monochromator, as we are using filters, prisms, so what is the basic difference between all these are? Filter will allow, SBW stands for spectral bandwidth. So the bandwidth, spectral bandwidth, if you use a filter, is about 50 nanometers. So that we called as wide band pass monochromator. If we use prism, the spectral bandwidth is less, 5 to 10, or it is even less than 5 nanometers. It is narrow band pass monochromator. So prisms will have very narrow bandwidth, whereas filter will have higher bandwidth. And diffraction gratings, they will have SBW is 15 to 20 nanometers. So when you are using prism, you can even select the wavelength with very, very short narrow band, that is 5 to 10 nanometers. So that is made to fall on the, or to make incident on the sample, and thereby we can get the clear picture of the absorbance or transmittance. Then sample holders. So cuvettes, these are the sample holders. They are made up of glass. You can see there's a clear side, opposite sides will be clear, and these two opposite sides will be frosted side. That means if you touch the surface of that, it will be rough. Whereas this clear side is smooth, opposite sides are clear. So when you touch those clear sides, it will be very smooth, and the light is being passed through the clear side. So when you place this cuvette into the calorimeter, or that is the cell holder, you have to see that the light passes through the clear side, not the frosted side. So cuvettes are rectangular cell, square or circular one, but we generally use the square cell. So it is made up of optical glass for visible, quartz or fused silica for UV. So common one is square, and the optical length of the cuvette is always 1 centimeter. See, this is the length of the cuvette. On all the four sides, it will be 1 centimeter. So this is taken as the standard path length of the sample solution. And the capacity is 3 ml, or it may be 2, 1, depending upon the thickness of the wall of the cuvette. And you can see these are the cuvettes which are filled with the solutions, and always you have to see that the solution is filled only up to the 3/4 of the cuvette, and you have to hold it with using your fingers, where the fingers has to touch on the frosted side, not on the clear side. Okay, you have to hold the cuvette on the frosted sides. So for accurate and precise reading, cuvette must be transparent, it should be clean, it should not have any scratches, and there should not be any air bubbles. So when you fill the cuvette with the solution, you have to check that there are no air bubbles in it. Then photosensitive detectors. So what these detectors do, they are converting light energy to the electrical energy. So all the light which is transmitted from the sample, that light when it falls on the detector, that light is converted into electrical energy. And the different detectors that are used are barrier layer cells, which are photo cells, very simplest cells, or photo emission cells, photo multiplier cells for low intensity lights, photoconductive cells, or photodiodes. So they are newest detectors that are being used now. So these are different types of detectors that we can use in the colorimeter. Then readout devices. So what we have to do is after the after the light energy is converted to electrical energy, so that has to be read out. So that readout devices, it may be a galvanometer, ammeter, recorder, digital readout, it may be anything, all this. So anyone you can have for to measure the amount of absorbance or the transmittance. So what is the criteria for satisfactory colorimetric estimation? So when you are doing colorimetric estimations, you have to take care about whether the stability of the color. The first point is whether the solution color is stable or not. Because sometimes what happens is the color will fade away due to air oxidation or due to some photochemical decomposition or because of temperature. So you have to ensure that the color is stable. Then the intensity of the color. So intensity of the color will be less for low concentrations. But you have to see that intensity of the color is more even in the low concentrated solutions. Then the clarity of the solution. So when you dissolve the solute in the solvent, you have to get a clear that is solution. So that clear solution, it should not have any turbidity or suspension or colloidal. So if all turbid, if it is giving rise to a turbid, suspension or colloid solution, what happens is when it absorbs the light, that light, it will get scattered. So thereby we cannot easily, we cannot get the accurate absorbance values. So when we are preparing the standard solutions, we have to see that the solution is clear without any turbidity. And it should give reproducible results. You have to see whether you have to check by changing the pH of that solution and check whether we are getting the results correctly or not. Specificity. Each color or each sample will have its specific color. So that specific color, if it is not there, so what you have to do is you have to treat it with some coloring agents, or you can change the oxidation state of that particular solution. So thereby you have to achieve specificity of the color. Then you have to see whether it is following Bayes' law, that is validity of Bayes' law. So by measuring the absorbance versus concentration, you have to get a calibration curve which is a straight line passing through the origin. So all these points we have to take care while doing the colorimeter experiment. So steps in operation. So how to operate this colorimeter? So first, as I said, I have shown you the sample holder, the cuvette. So first you have to clean the cuvette. Then fill the cuvette with 3/4 of distilled water and place in the slot, cuvette slot, that is the sample holder. And you have to switch on the instrument and you have to allow it to wait on, or it will get warm up for 4 to 5 minutes. Then you have to adjust the knob, that is it has to show, suppose if we are taking distilled water, so distilled water, it will have 0 absorbance, 100% transmittance. So you have to adjust the knobs for 0, and then if you are adjusting it for transmittance, it should be 100% transmittance. Then what we have to do is take out that cuvette. After adjusting the instrument, take out that cuvette and then remove the distilled water, fill it with the blank solution now. So blank solution means whatever the solvent you are using for the preparation of sample solution, that you have to select as a blank solution. because that blank solution will also absorb some of the radiations. So blank solution is taken, again put it in the instrument, and its OD, that is absorbance, is measured, and it is taken as B. B stands for blank. Now again the blank solution is transferred to the original test tube, that is after transferring the blank solution. Now the cuvette is cleaned, and then we have to take test solution in it. In that test solution, again we have to keep that cuvette in the calorimeter, and then we have to measure the optical density or the absorbance. Now what we have to do is again remove the test solution from the cuvette and then fill that with the standard solution. Even the standard solutions, we have to take at least minimum 5 standard solutions of any mixture, and then we have to measure the absorbance for each and individual standard solution. Then what we have to do is we have to draw a graph where absorbance is taken on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we have to take the that is the concentration. So in this way we can actually determine the concentration of the sample solution. So we have to substitute all those values in this formula, that is concentration of test is equal to T minus B by S minus B. So T stands for the absorbance of the test solution, B stands for the concentration of the blank solution, S is for the standard solution, again B for the blank solution. CS stands for the concentration of standard solution, and B for the volume of the test sample. So what is the volume of the test sample, what we have taken, that we have to substitute the value here, V, into 100. So by substituting all the absorbance and the concentration of the standard sample here in this formula, we can calculate the percentage concentration of the test solution, that is the sample solution. So generally the absorbance values, if they fall between 0.1 to 0.7, then we can get the satisfactory results are obtained. Or we can go for another type where, that is, we are verifying the Bayes law, whether the sample is, that is, if it is satisfying the Bayes law or not. So verification of Bayes law, here we have taken an example of estimation of iron in water samples by thiocyanate method. So we have to estimate the amount of the iron present in the water by using thiocyanate. So what we have to do is, even here we have to prepare the standard solution. So first thing is, iron which is present here, we are taking in ferric, Fe+3. So Fe+3 iron will react with excess of thiocyanate to give the complex, this one, that is hexathiocyanate iron 3 complex. Now this complex is red in color. So as I said, calorimeter is used for finding out the concentrations of the colored solutions. So suppose if we have iron which is present in water, that is nothing but it will not show, it is like colorless. So what we have to do is to make, in order to make it color, we are reacting that iron with the thiocyanate. So it is giving rise to a red colored solution. So a large excess of thiocyanate should be used, as this increases the intensity and the stability of the color. And here we have to see that we have to add acids also, either hydrochloric acid or nitric acid, to suppress the hydrolysis. So in the equation you can see Fe+3 reacting with 6 moles of thiocyanate ion to form hexacyano iron 3 complex, which is red in color. Whereas iron, which is hydrolysis, undergoes ferric hydroxide. So we need this red colored solution which measures the intensity of the light. So procedure, first we need to prepare the standard solution of iron. So for this we are taking ferric ammonium sulfate. So ferric ammonium sulfate, here we have given some of the values. So 0.864 grams of ferric ammonium sulfate is taken in distilled water, and to that we need to add 10 ml of concentrated HCl and then dilute it up to 1 liter in a standard flask. So that is taken as the standard solution of iron. Then we need to prepare the potassium thiocyanate solution also. So for this, 20 grams of potassium thiocyanate is dissolved in 100 ml of distilled water. So which is, when this is reacted with iron, it will show color. And then we need to prepare various concentrated solutions. So different volumes of this iron solution, standard iron solution, what we have prepared, these solutions you have to take in 25 ml standard flask. So minimum 5 to 6 25 ml standard flask we need to keep ready. Okay, and in that you have to take this standard iron solution which is prepared in the first step. So in first standard flask you can have 10 ml, in the second standard flask you can take 15, then 20, 25, like that. So when you are adding this standard solution of iron to the same standard flask, for all the 5 standard flasks what we have taken, we have to add 5 ml of potassium thiocyanate also. Okay, so for each 5 standard flask, we have to add 5 ml of potassium thiocyanate. And then we have to fill it with the distilled water. So mark will be there. So till that mark, you have to make up the solution with using distilled water. So in all these 5 standard flask solutions, which are 25 ml each, they are having different concentration of iron in them, because we have taken different volume of iron in each of the standard flask. And now what, you just shake it and then find out the absorbance for each and every solutions what we have prepared. So after finding out the absorbance at lambda max 490 nanometers. So we have to see for all the solutions where the lambda max is observed. At 490 nanometers, you have to set the instrument and then find out the absorbance of all the standard solutions what we have prepared. Then we have to draw a calibration curve. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 or 6 are there. So first one, what is the absorbance? All the points we have to first write. So we have to note all the points and then join all the points such that you will get a straight line, and this straight line has to pass through the origin. So that means it is satisfying the Bayer's law. Now what we need to do, we will be having some unknown iron solution will be given, and we have to find out what is the concentration of that unknown iron solution. So for that, what we have to do is determination of iron 3 in an unknown sample. So if unknown sample is given, what we have to do is again take that unknown sample solution into the cuvette and then measure its absorbance. Suppose the absorbance is found here. Okay, so mark it on the same calibration curve. This is a calibrated curve. Suppose if the absorbance is found here. So now what we have to do is we have to mark that point and draw a perpendicular from both the y-axis and the x-axis, such that it touches the straight line, calibrated line. Okay, so when you draw perpendicular like this, so the perpendicular where it is touching on the x-axis, this is the concentration. So this is the absorbance of the unknown solution. So from that point you draw a line straight and then straight down onto the x-axis. So that gives the concentration of unknown solution. So this is how we can calculate the concentration of unknown solution through colorimeter. So the graph will be like this. This is a calibrated curve. So absorbance is 0.273. So somewhere here you will find the absorbance. So corresponding to that, we have to draw a line and then perpendicular onto the x-axis. So here it is 0.23. So it touches the point here, which is 0.23 moles per liter. So that will be the concentration of the unknown sample solution. So we'll see now what are the applications of colorimetry. So by using the same Lambert-Bayer's law, we can easily find out the concentration of any biological compound which is present in blood, plasma, serum, CSF, that is cerebrospinal fluid, urine, etc. So we can also determine the concentration of iron, chloride, fluoride, manganese, zinc in water samples. To determine the nitrates, phosphorus, ammonia in fertilizers, soil samples. To determine the hemoglobin in blood samples. To determine the color in beverage, food products. So how much of color is being added into the beverages or the food products, that also can be determined. And we can monitor the growth of bacterial and yeast. Determine the color used in printer toners. So the toners, the colors which we use for printing, so how much color is used in that can also be determined by using colorimetry. So this is about colorimetry. So what is the principle behind it, and what are the different components presented and the applications. So all these applications that is we can determine by using colorimetry is based upon the intensity of the light which is being absorbed by the sample solutions. Now we'll move on to the another technique, which is spectrophotometer. So spectrophotometer principle is instrumentation and principle almost similar to that of colorimeter only. But the basic difference between these two is in colorimeter, we can determine the that is the concentration of only the colored solutions. Whereas in colorless solutions cannot be determined by the colorimeter. So for that colorless solutions, we can go for spectrophotometer. So these are the various parts in spectrophotometer, same thing as that of colorimeter, but the light sources that we use here will be different. So first we'll see what is spectrophotometer. It is a technique used to measure same light intensity as a function of wavelength. So how this is done is by diffracting the light beam into a spectrum of wavelengths, detecting the intensities with a charge coupled device and displaying the results as a graph on the detector and then on the display device. So this is being done process where we can find out the absorbance or the transmittance. So in spectrophotometer, a prism or grating is used to split the incident beam into different wavelengths. So here this is the prism or the grating, same thing again, it can split the light into different wavelengths, and these wavelengths of the light, it will range from 1 to 2 nanometers, and then they are passed into the solution which is present in the cuvette, and the transmitted light will be detected by the photocells, and it is displayed on the spectrophotometer. So this is spectrophotometer sample compartment. Here if we open that, we can find the compartment for placing the samples. This is source, monochromator, detectors will be there here. This is display and controls. So in spectrophotometer, we have two types. There are single beam spectrophotometer and double beam spectrophotometer. So single beam spectrophotometer, similar to that of colorimeter, it has a light source, but here the light source here is, we will be having either tungsten filament for visible, or else we can go for UV, that is we will be having hydrogen or deuterium lamp. So hydrogen or deuterium lamp can be used as a light source for visible, UV, whereas tungsten filament can be used for visible light source. So it is passed through monochromator where the wavelength is selected. Then it is passed on to the sample. The light is detected, and then we will get the result. Whereas in double beam spectrophotometer, the same thing, light sources, UV visible light sources can be used. The monochromator will scan it, and the beam will split into two parts. So it is chopped into two beams by rotating mirror. So one beam will pass into the sample cuvette, and the other beam will strike the mirror, and this is passed to the reference cuvette. So both these are, again, the light is transmitted out from these two cuvettes, and it falls on the mirror, and it is detected by detector and displayed. So the main difference between single beam and double beam is here only one beam of light is made to pass through the sample. Here the monochromator light is again split into two beams where we are using two cuvettes simultaneously at a time, one for the sample, one for the reference. And then the signal transmitted light is being detected by the detector and displayed. So the instruments what we use in spectrophotometer are almost similar, same again light source. So tungsten and deuterium lamp are used. So the same thing is again repeated here. So we are moving fast here. So monochromator, same thing, filter, prism, diffraction gratings, interference filters can be used, dispersion devices. So here, this is made with hundreds of parallel groove lines. So you can see these are the groove lines which are present. So what is the main use of this is the light which is passing through these grooves can be broken down into smaller lines, that is with small wavelength resolution. So that is the main important thing in spectrophotometer. So more lines, the smaller the wavelength resolution. Then focusing devices, cuvettes, same thing, detectors, display devices. So display devices, again a digital display or an LCD can be used, computer or printer. Then we'll see how the single beam spectrophotometer works. So as I said, we'll be having light source, deuterium lamp or tungsten lamp. So tungsten lamp is for the visible range, deuterium lamp is for the that is UV light, and then it is having collimating convex lens. So where the light from these sources will fall onto this lens, moves onto the diaphragm. So diaphragm is set for 100% transmittance. Then it falls on the monochromator where a specific wavelength of the light is selected and it is made to pass on to this focusing convex lens, which again falls on the cuvette, incident light, then transmitted light is it will fall on the photocell and measured through galvanometer. So here you can see the light source falling on this. All the light radiations from the light source are being passed through collimating convex lens, diaphragm, monochromator. So specific wavelength of the light is being selected by using the prisms and gratings. Then it is made to fall onto the sample solution. So the transmitted light will fall on the photocell, and that light is converted into electric signal, and that is measured by galvanometer. So now here, this is about single beam spectrometer. So in the galvanometer, we will be measuring the absorbance. So this is a graph we will get. On x-axis, the wavelength is taken. On the y-axis, it is the absorbance. Okay. So the value, the wavelength where the absorbance is maximum, you can see this height of the peak, wherever it is maximum, that corresponding line onto the x-axis will give the lambda max value. See, lambda max. So the lambda max, by using that lambda max value, we can measure the concentration of unknown compounds by using Lambert-Beer's law. Now we'll see the double beam spectrophotometer. So how it works is again the light source, so deuterium lamp or tungsten lamp, or else you can also have IR light source. For IR, we'll be using Nernst Glower, that is made up of that is rare earth oxides such as yttrium and zirconium oxides. We have to heat that at about 1500 to 2000 centigrade such that it will release IR radiations. So these are the light sources. Now what we are showing, deuterium for UV, and then deuterium, or you can take hydrogen lamp for UV and tungsten for visible. And the light sources, they are passed onto the collimating convex lens. So all the light will fall on this convex lens, which are passed through the diaphragm for setting 100% transmittance. And from the diaphragm, it has to be passed through the monochromator made up of prism and gratings. The same thing again, but only thing is from the monochromator, we'll be having two mirrors there. After that, Then we'll have two cells, two cuvettes, one per reference, that is blank solution, one for the sample, then two photo cells also, which are again connected to the galvanometer. Now, in this case, now when the light from the deuterium and the tungsten lamp are all the light radiations, whatever are coming from the light sources, they are passed on to the collimating convex lens, then to the diaphragm, the monochromator. Now from the monochromator, you can see as it falls, now on the mirror, the beam, it will split into two beams. One beam will pass into the reference cell. The another beam strikes onto the mirror where it is made to pass onto the sample cell. So one will be reference, one will be sample, and the transmitted light is passed on to, it will fall onto the photocells. So photocells, two photocells are there, and then it will show the absorbance or the transmittance. So the same thing, the graph obtained by taking wavelength on the x-axis, absorbance on the y-axis. So the absorbance, wherever it is high, that wavelength is taken as the lambda max value. So by using that lambda max value, it is used for qualitative as well as quantitative analytical measurements. And it should concentration can be found out by using Beer-Lambert's law. So this is how the double beam spectrophotometer works. Then we'll look at the applications. So applications are, that is the same thing, concentration measurement. So how to find out the concentration, we have seen with iron. So first prepare the samples, standard samples, and then draw the graph, calibration curve we will get. Then what we need to do, the unknown sample has to be measured, the absorbance has to be measured for the unknown sample, and then it has to be plotted here. Then draw the perpendicular onto the this one calibrated graph line, and then down onto the concentration axis, that is x-axis. So we can find out the concentration. Wherever the line is touching the x-axis, that will be the concentration of the unknown sample. Then we can also detect the impurities. So you can see in this two spectra, this is with impurity, this is standard. So this is standard spectra, and this is with the impurity. You can see some more peaks or bands. So by just comparing the spectra, you can find whether it is impure or not. Then it is used for structural elucidation of organic compounds. So whether presence or absence of unsaturation or the presence of heteroatoms, that can also be identified by using spectrophotometer. Then what are its advantages? So it has very high degree of spectral purity, minimum stray light into the exit beam. That is, stray light means the wavelength outside the desired light is called stray light. So whatever wavelength you are selecting, that particular wavelength should go and hit the sample. So whatever the wavelength outside that particular selected wavelength is nothing but stray light. So that stray light is cut off in spectrophotometer, and it will give a greater accurate results. It is more sensitive, specific, and precise. Now, what are differences between colorimeter and spectrophotometer? So we have seen both the techniques, instrumentation of both. So by looking at this chart, you can say that monochromators in colorimeter we can use filter, whereas spectrophotometer prisms, because prisms will have very spectral bandwidth is very less, 5 to 10 nanometers. So that is why the very accurate results are obtained from spectrophotometer. So spectral bandwidth, here it is broad, narrow. The spectral purity is less in colorimeter, more in spectrophotometer. Then isolation, spectral isolation, filter has to be changed in colorimeter. So here in spectrophotometer, you can just adjust the wavelengths. Stray light is more in colorimeter, minimum in spectrophotometer. Accuracy is less in case of colorimeter, more spectrometer. Sample needed is large in colorimeter, whereas spectrophotometer requires only very small amount of sample. And in the cost wise, colorimeter is cheap, whereas spectrophotometer is cost. Light source, visible range of light is only used in colorimeter. Okay, that is tungsten filament is used, whereas in spectrophotometer, beyond the visible range, you can use UV light or visible light for this. So this is about colorimeter and spectrophotometer and how it works, and we have seen how to determine the concentration of unknown sample. So remember, colorimetry is for only colored solutions, whereas spectrophotometer is for both colored or colorless solutions also. So hope you have understood this topic. Thank you. Thank you for watching.